Welcome back to another Engaged podcast. Ryan Argenta here, your host. Today I'm with Casey Songster. She's a 737 First Officer and also works with Central Air Safety. She's the Vice Chairman of the SMS Subcommittee. I always say that's a mouthful, but Casey, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Ryan. It's good to be here.
You're part of the SMS Subcommittee. Why don't you tell us just a little bit about yourself and what that committee does, and then we're going to jump into LOSA, which we're hitting all the acronyms. And so maybe tell us what SMS and LOSA stand for, what you do for ALPA, and we'll jump into the LOSA program.
That was the perfect segue. So my job in the Central Air Safety Committee, it's a committee of over 120 volunteers, is on safety management systems, which plugs in really directly to the company side in SMS. And LOSA, being Line Operations Safety Audit, is one of our safety assurance programs, which is one of the core components of SMS. So a lot of my work has to do with some administrative stuff because you can't get away from that. But it has to do with reviewing our safety programs, assisting, kind of working with key counterparts over on the company with these safety programs, and working with my boss, Helena Cunningham, the Central Air Safety Chair, in terms of assessing, attending meetings, how are our programs doing, what are our risks identified. And then Bill Vendetti, he actually is on the safety assurance team, which works directly in the safety assurance programs, and it analyzes new identified risks. So it's a lot of the behind the scenes work. You're not going to really hear from us ever. It's not as, I would say, directly involved as like ASAP, but it's very much behind the scenes work on the safety assurance SMS side of the house.
Yeah, that's a lot. And so this is yet another committee at ALPA that is working behind the scenes. Pilots are out flying the line, doing their thing. And we don't often think about what's going on in the background, right? I think government affairs is kind of another one. People know about it, but what are the inner workings? And it feels like safety is one of those, right? And so your committee or your subcommittee is certainly one of those.
Definitely. And we talk a lot about touch points. When would a pilot interact or hear from us? You never would. Pilot involvement is key because this is, we're talking about LOSA today, but it's a voluntary safety program. And we're trying to get every possible bit of information from our line pilots, either through direct reporting or from a regular line flight, to really figure out what sort of nonsense goes on out there every day and what we as the airline or we as ALPA can do to better support our pilots in terms of like risk mitigation, hazard identification.
Yeah. And so I think from a pilot perspective, your interaction with LOSA, I think of two ways that you come across this. One is you go to DeltaNet flight or something and it says, you go to flight ops and it says continuous LOSA beginning in July. And then you see another like, hey, you want to be a LOSA pilot? The application window's open. And the other way that this shows up is somebody shows up in your Jumpseat and says, hi, my name's Bob, and I'm part of the LOSA program. I'm going to be joining your flight. And it seems to me at least, and hopefully this episode will kind of clarify some of this, but when somebody shows up to your cockpit and says, hey, I'm going to do a safety audit, I think pilots kind of clam up. And so this is to put some myths to bed. Does that all check the ways you would interact with LOSA?
Yes, definitely. So it featuring the word audit, I don't think anybody has a positive relationship with the word audit. So that's part of it. Usually we just use the acronym. I am a LOSA observer, and I will tell you one of the common questions that we've gotten is like, who is in my jump seat? Are you a regular commuter? We have to LOSA observers wear regular clothing, non-uniform. Are you a line check pilot? Are you secret shopper? My flight? Are you with the FAA? So yeah, it's really good to talk about this because I wouldn't want, my next round of observations that I'm going to do next month, I wouldn't want anybody to worry that I'm going to out them or anything like that.
Yeah. So let's start there. So again, pilot perspective, walk me through when a crew would figure out that they have a LOSA observer on board and what that looks like.
Yeah. So I pick my flight. Sometimes the company has the choice to assign observers to certain routes. We're trying to get a really good grasp of the entire operation. So not just Atlanta, not just LA, the entire airline. I'd reach out to the crew that I'm going to be observing, assuming they stay the same and they don't get rerouted or some craziness. About 4 or 5 days before the trip, I try to make sure they're not, on rest or currently on a layover or something. They might be asleep. And I try to text them, let them know who I am, what I'm going to be doing, and just it's a text message. So I really don't want it to be like super long, but, just a quick outline of the LOSA program and the fact that it's voluntary. And I asked both the captain and FO in two separate messages, is it okay if I ride along on your flight? This is what I'll be doing. And they have full discretion to say no. And all I would ask if they do say no is why. The program manager would very much like to know why. If there's anything we could put out safety promotion material wise to dispel any myths, we would do it. But I've never been denied so far. I'm going to knock on wood. But yeah, that's usually when you'd first hear from me. In some circumstances, if a crew member gets rerouted or some delays result in a crew change, I would try to do it at the gate. But once again, I would try to do it not on the flight deck if I can catch the crew before they go down to the aircraft. That way it feels less like, hey, I'm already here. You're not going to turn me away. And they can
Yeah,
absolutely
yeah.
gatehouse say like, no, go away. And I would. It wouldn't
Okay.
really bother me at all.
Well, and that's really good to know, and that's a great setup, right? So this isn't some Jeopardy event. It's not really forced on the crew. This is, and we'll get into the nuts and bolts of it because really you're just trying to figure out what are the obstacles, what are the challenges going on these flights. Okay, so that's really great. You reach out to the crew ahead of time, and I was going to joke that you reach out to the crew and then that trip goes into open time because
Happens.
everybody dropped it, and then the chances of not getting rerouted, especially during the summer, are pretty low. But anyway, so you pick your flight. You're going to try to observe, and you reach out to the crew, tee it up so people kind of know that you're going to be on board, and then go from there, right? So now you've introduced yourself, and you want to document really the whole flight, including the pre-flight process, right? So you're just kind of along for the ride, literally.
Exactly. And it is a little different. I'm on the 7-3. There's not a lot of room up there. So I am kind of in the way during the pre-flight phase. So that is a little unfortunate. Or pilots that are in larger aircrafts that have a little bit more wiggle room on the flight deck, maybe it's not so obtrusive. But that is one thing I try to tell them straight away. Like, I will be up here. Sorry, if I could turn to dust, I would, but it'll be up here. And the other thing I try to tell them and really reiterate is the note taking process. Because just like you said, we're trying to recreate the flight from start to finish. That includes clearances, MELs, maintenance items, any instructions that were received, everything, weather, where the weather was, the ATIS. So all that goes into a notebook. And my pen doesn't click. That was one thing we got in training was a non-clicking pen. So the goal is to be as unobtrusive as possible and to make sure the pilots kind of forget you're there, ideally. And we have a whole introduction that kind of demystifies the note-taking process. And really what we're following along is the threat and error management model, which is something we use a bit on the flight deck. We just go one step further and take it a little bit more on the analytical side as an observer. So you have the threats, which is everything outside of the flight deck. You have the errors, which would only be the crew. If someone else makes an error, like a flight attendant makes an error, that would be a threat to the pilot. If, weather is a threat, maintenance items are threats. Errors would be, not hearing a clearance, not seeking clarification, something along those lines. And then an undesirable aircraft state would be an untrapped error that results in an unfavorable state of the aircraft. An unstable approach, a extremely fast taxi speed that results in, skidding or anything like that. I don't ever really get a lot of those, but those are also undesirable aircraft states. So we're following that. We're identifying those threats, errors, and UASs, and kind of working through the flight that way.
I like the non-clicking pen thing. That's key. And then I want to put out there because you don't record names, crew names, dates. You don't even record the flight number, right?
Correct. Yeah. The only thing we put in the report is the month and year the observation happened, and then the city pair. Everything else is completely de-identified. There's no crew names. We don't even use pronouns. So it's all they, captain, FO, pilot flying, pilot monitoring.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so and you're observing the crew, but you don't care about who the crew member is. You're just looking for the error chains and traps, and all this data comes together to make things better and safer for Delta pilots, right?
Absolutely.
It's not a check ride. It's not specific to the crew. It's not a punitive program. It's totally anonymous. I kind of want to put that out there so that pilots will welcome you in and really make you feel comfortable and say like, hey, thanks for helping us out. Join in.
Yeah. And a lot of pilots are really curious about what where does this go? They're probably never going to see me again, the observer. And they might not see their flight. That's unlike an ASAP where you get some sort of closure like, okay, the report was accepted. LOSA, the idea behind it is once I submit my report, it goes to kind of a back end data validation, making sure what I coded was correct, is indeed a threat, is indeed an error. And then all of that gets pulled together for each fleet. And then that is submitted to the safety assurance aspect. It gets reviewed. And one of the biggest customers, I would say, and this is general for all LOSA programs, usually the fleet team. It's really good to know in the training world kind of where the errors are happening, what mitigations are working, maybe what isn't working as well. And then reassessing procedures, possibly putting out additional training materials as the recent change isn't being adopted uniformly. It may be a certain like workarounds or ways that pilots are doing things that are separate from our procedures. Maybe those actually work better and they save time. So why don't we implement those? So that's probably our biggest customer. But it is still a safety assurance program in the sense that if a new hazard is identified within LOSA, then it would follow our SMS process and risk management to then be assessed, possibly resulting in like a risk assessment or something along those lines. So it's kind of nuanced the way it works, but the idea, I think, in its purest form, if we really kind of reduce things down, FOQA is like the airplane's perspective of a flight, and ASAP is a pilot's perspective. This is more of like a neutral third party with LOSA.
That's a really good way of explaining it. So yeah, let's go through that again, right? So people talk about FOQA and like, oh, I had an unstable approach. FOQA is the airplane saying this was an unstable approach, and it sends that to the company and the fleet, and they, again, anonymous, de-identified, and they look at that. And then the pilots may submit an ASAP and say, hey, we had an unstable approach and here's what happened and here's why. And that protects the pilots and then gives that pilot perspective. And so LOSA is really just the fly on the wall, that jump seater's perspective of kind of a neutral third party.
Exactly. Yeah. And we try to be a fly on the wall. So, I'll crack jokes with the crew or just like any dump seat briefing you get from a captain. That's pretty standard is, hey, you're a part of the crew. Look out, look for traffic, help us, if you hear us say something wrong, correct us. And every LOSA observer will do that. We're not just going to sit back there like it's a STEM event and just watch it all play out. If we hear, a different altitude that was said, I would absolutely speak up. If, I wouldn't want anybody to have an ASAP to file at the end of a LOSA observation if I can help it.
Gotcha. Totally makes sense. Okay. Let me flip this around. So how many LOSA observers are in the program?
For the last year, we've had around 45, and that covers all fleets. So some fleets, like larger fleets, like the 320, they have quite a few, I think 12. The 73 has around 10. And the ER and the 76400 are combined. So those observers, fewer with those. But altogether, there's about 40.
Okay, awesome. And so it sounds like you're hiring, you're looking for more observers.
Definitely.
So if you're interested in becoming an observer, you can look for emails from ALPA and or the company, right, regarding the application window. I think
They can reach out actually directly to the Flight Ops SMS program manager in LOSA. And the best part there, and all of that's available in DeltaNet, they actually have a question and answer session available before the application window closes. You can register for that. And you'll be able to figure out, if you're worried about your schedule or how pay works, all those really important pilot questions. That's going to be available as a Q&A and also a FAQ on the Delta LOSA application.
Okay, I guess two-part question. One is, how often are you doing LOSA observations, say, per fleet? And how often is a volunteer or an observer doing a LOSA check?
Most fleets do 2 per month. Some of the smaller fleets like the 717 and the 220 currently only do 1 observation per month. And then you get a certain number of days to do the observation, schedule the observation, and then write the observation. And that's posted on your schedule ahead of time, usually about 2 months prior. It follows the normal pre-post schedule. And it really helps if you're junior in your category. You can kind of help bump you up towards the line window in terms of bidding. So there's a
Okay.
benefit for all.
And I assume it's fleet specific. So you're on the 737. Do you observe on, say, the 330 or the 350, or do you observe on the 73 because you know that aircraft?
Exactly. Just my fleet. The only exception would be the ER and the 76400.
Right. Okay. And then kind of fun stuff, but do you get to select what flight you want to observe?
Yeah, we do. That's a great benefit. I've started to get in the habit of just trying to find where the really good data is, but by golly, if you got to go to Aruba, I mean, we fly to Aruba. It's
Yeah,
part
is
of
it,
the extent,
yeah, I'm sure you're really looking for the data.
you know,
Data and good layover.
exactly.
And if you're on that layover, you're kind of still part of the crew? You take the crew van to the hotel, participate, do the thing, and then do you ride back with them? Do you non-rev out? Like, what does that look like?
That's a great question. We can't observe the same crew twice, or
Cannot.
we shouldn't in the same rotation. So if it's like a round trip for them, I would try to take a different flight if that wasn't available. If it's kind of we only fly the 7-3, one leg a day, and it's the same crew, then either I have a really long layover or I deadhead out and then do a different observation on a different flight. So it varies. It's kind of fun to look on that side of the schedule and see where it is we fly.
Awesome. That all sounds pretty great from both perspectives, right? So we'll leave it at that unless there's anything else you want to talk about LOSA. Any other questions you get that you want the Delta pilots to know about LOSA?
Yeah, thank you. I do have one last thing, and it's a question I get when I show up on the flight deck. Pilots will casually ask, like, so are you with ALPA? Are you with the company? And it's really important that we reiterate over and over again that obviously this is a voluntary de-identified program, but it's also a joint program. And it's something that ALPA and the company both have buy-in to, and it's governed by the memorandum of understanding, but it's kind of a both. It's everybody's program.
Okay. So kind of like Switzerland, very neutral.
There you go.
All right. I like it. Casey Songster, thanks so much for being here. The vice chairman of the SMS Subcommittee of the Central Air Safety Committee. We really appreciate it. I hope pilots hear this and really welcome you and your team on board and make it fun. Might as well.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
You're listening to Engage, the podcast for Delta pilots. Follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcast, or your favorite podcast platform, and receive notifications when a new episode is available.